Hola, I'm Jorge Ramos.
And I'm Paula Ramos.
And this is The Moment. So in times of struggle, of attacks, of cruelty, when people are being called names like stupid and garbage, when there's a possibility of war in Venezuela, just a possibility, the question is, how do we keep faith alive? And what's the role of religious leaders in these conflicts?
So I think there's two types of religious leaders out there, right? There's the type of religious leader that is using this moment to embrace Donald Trump and to push forward this type of Christian nationalist agenda. Because remember, right, this is a president who has a lot of support from Christians and evangelicals. But then there's the other side of the story and the other side of this community. And there are people like Bishop Mariann Budde who became completely viral during Donald Trump's second inauguration when, as she was delivering the sermon of his inauguration, she ended her speech by asking Donald Trump to have mercy on two key groups, to have mercy on immigrants and on LGBTQ children. And so we're going to be speaking to Bishop Mariann Budde, who's been the Bishop of Washington, D.C. since 2011, and who's also the first woman ever to hold that role.
So we're going to talk about hope and faith with Bishop Budde, who actually said that courage is contagious, when we come back. Bishop Mariann Budde, welcome to The Moment. Thanks for joining us.
Un placer. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Sí, gracias por estar aquí. So, Bishop, we really, really wanted to talk to you specifically before the end of the year and as we're entering the holidays, because I think a lot of our listeners and followers are constantly wrestling with this question around how to hold on to faith. And faith, meaning religious faith, and even this idea of hope. And I think we could think of no better person that has this incredibly unique insight into the type of role faith is playing, the type of role faith should play, can play at a time of national crisis. And so that's where I would love to start with you. When you are having conversations with some parishioners and when they talk to you about their loss, their fear, their traumas, what do you tell them about the role of faith today?
First of all, thank you for allowing me to be with you and to be in conversation with you and your larger audience. I would say, first of all, that to be a person of faith or to be a person of hope never asks us to minimize or deny our suffering and our pain. And that one of the hardest lessons we learn in life, and we learn it very young, and that is to be a person of faith doesn't prevent terrible things from happening to us and to those we love, doesn't prevent us from living through times of struggle. And so we live with the promise that we are not alone, that we were created by a God who loves us and who longs to be with us and who walks with us. And when we are disappointed or when we are afraid or when things don't turn out the way we had deeply hoped, those are the moments when we are asked to dig deep, draw deep, I should say, from the wells of a different kind of faith or of hope that doesn't depend so much on success or outcomes or having things turn out the way we want, but to believe in things that we know are good and right and true, and that expand our capacity to love, and even to love amidst suffering. So it's a tender and a poignant kind of faith. But I think the Christmas story is the perfect vehicle for that, because while we surround it with all the trappings of glitter and joy and love and peace, all those things are true, but the story is about a family on the margins of an oppressed society that were forced to leave their town and go to another and then to flee again. So it is a story that brings solidarity and comfort to us when we are facing trials of our own.
And a familiar story, I should say, these days.
And a familiar story. And it's a very, we can see it happening all around us. And so I would wish for a God that made things easier for us, but that's not the life we have, and it's not the faith we've been given. But we have been given the assurance of solidarity and the hope for a better day. I mean, I really do believe that God planted that hope inside us. But God also asks us to work toward the things that we long for and to be people of peace and to be people of love.
When you talk, Bishop, right, I feel like faith sort of holds on to this idea, to your point, of better days. This idea that something better is at the end of the tunnel, or on the other end. But I'm curious if you have noticed a decline in people's belief and hope these days. And the reason why I ask you this is because my dad and I are constantly having these conversations around how so many immigrants are losing faith in the American dream. And this constantly comes up in conversation. And so I'm curious around what you have noticed.
Well, I think our hopes and our aspirations for this country are taking a real hit right now. We are all being faced with realities and ways of being and behaviors that, from the highest levels all the way through the society, that are just so disheartening and sometimes just extraordinarily cruel. And so we would be made of stone not to feel the impact of that, right? How could we not feel that, particularly when this country represented so much hope and aspiration for so many, and that getting here was such a journey of hope for so many. And so to have that dashed by people who are, first of all, saying terrible things that are not true about the immigrant population, and then using those falsehoods to justify all manner of action. So I would say, yes, you have reason to have lost hope in the illusion of the American dream right now, as this country is being led and encouraged to respond to its most isolationist and impulse and mean-spirited impulses. It's not the first time in American history. We have lived through times like this before, and immigrants have been treated terribly in the past. And so this is part of our story. It's not the best part. It's the underbelly of the American story, and we're seeing it now. And my only hope regarding this, and it is a hope, is that the pendulum will swing again. But it won't swing on its own. It needs people who are determined to say, this is not the vision of America that we believe is, well, it's certainly not our better angels, as Abraham Lincoln would say, and it's actually not God's dream for us. That we were established and created for a much higher aspirational reality, and we've seen glimpses of it, and we can go back to that, or we can create a new future. But I'm afraid it's going to take a lot of hard work, and many people are suffering.
And precisely because of what you're saying, I have to ask you a question that I never thought I would have to ask a religious person. And is it safe to go to your church? Is your church safe?
It depends on who you are, right? Depends on the color of your skin. And we are doing our very best in the churches that have predominant immigrant populations, or where there are services where vulnerable people of all kinds, immigrant or not, gather, to ensure as much safety as we can. We have people who are standing guard at the doors. We have people who are managing. We have people who are delivering food, as opposed to asking people to come to places to receive food. We're doing everything we possibly can.
Wow, you have guards? I'm sorry to interrupt.
We have
you
not
actually
armed
guards?
We have volunteers. We have volunteers with skin that look like mine, who are just keeping guard on the doors and making sure that if any, and to see if any official comes in, that they are that people are warned, and that there is some manner of protection. So far, we haven't had anyone come in from ICE or the police to interrupt a church service, but people are afraid. And there have been arrests in parking lots outside of churches where people were lining up for food. And so we are just doing everything we can. And it's, but I have to tell you, the number of people who are stepping up to do this work is heartening. We have more volunteers, frankly, than we can use on a given weekend to sort of keep patrol, to deliver food, to secure housing and childcare for people who are now living in their cars. It is. Well, you don't need me to tell you. It's a heartbreaking time.
And I'm assuming the number of people going to church also has diminished. But I wonder, let me just say on this, if ICE agents come to the church, can you actually physically prevent them from coming in?
No, not legally.
You can't?
No, not legally.
So you have to allow them to come in?
There was always an understanding that houses of worship and schools and other places where social services were being offered were not to be were not places where ICE would go, but that was never inscribed in law. It was always an understanding, and the Trump administration has done away with that. Now, again, we haven't had ICE officers come into a worship service. They haven't done that, but they do congregate in parking lots and along the streets, and or they have. It's now we saw this wave in Washington D.C. a few months ago. It's kind of receded now. Now it tends to be more, stopping people in their cars. And there was just a lawsuit that was brought against that action. And a judge actually said, no, you can't do that. You can't stop people in their cars and arrest them. But for every action that has to be fought in the courts, as you know, there is just a brazenness to the actions that are being taken.
Now, how do you deal with this, with the divisions within the congregation? What happens if within the congregations you have parishioners who truly believe that parishioners without legal status should be detained, should be arrested? Is there a division within the congregation?
It's a really good question. In my experience now, keep in mind I'm a bishop, so I have about 84 congregations under my care. Right. And I would say that there is division in the wider diocese. The congregations that have a significant immigrant population, there isn't the same kind of division that I might see in a congregation that is predominantly of the dominant white culture. Having said that, I have had congregations with naturalized citizens who came through the immigration process, in their mind legally, and there is some frustration with the number of people who have come across the border, particularly in the last couple of years. But I have to say that's a very, very small percentage of the people who are attending our congregations. The vast majority are working very hard to protect as many people as we can.
We're going to take our first break, but we'll be back in just a moment. We're back in our conversation with Bishop Budde. Paola.
So, Bishop, as we're finalizing the year and closing it out, I would love for us to reflect and to look back at the moment when the entire world suddenly knew exactly who you were. Now, it's January 20th, and you're, of course, delivering the sermon for President Trump's inauguration. And you close out that speech by asking him to show more mercy on LGBTQ children, to show mercy on immigrants. And I think it's fair to say that the President of the United States has not shown mercy, but I wonder if you have been surprised at any of his actions, or if, in fact, he simply confirmed your deepest fears.
What a good guy. I'm not sure how to answer that. I think I've been stunned by the speed with which these changes have occurred. And I've also been humbled by the fact that it is not just the president, but a whole apparatus of people and institutions that are supporting him. And so it's not one man, but a whole movement that now has, for the time being, virtually all the reins of political power. and other institutions are falling in line. And so it's that, to me, I think, has been the most sobering, and I would say surprising, in the sense that it would have been impossible to imagine it until it happened. Having said that, I am also heartened by the number of people who are in dignified and matter-of-fact and ways, small and large, simply saying, we believe in another reality, and we believe in other values, and we will do whatever we can in our power, however that is lived out, to ensure that this season of our life is not the defining one forever. And so we're trying to protect as many people as we can, to save as many institutions that are being dismantled as we can, to put in place some of the steps needed to reclaim some of the levers of political power, so that we can stop some of the damage that's being done. But I would say it has been. I'm not even shocked anymore. Every day I read something and I can't even muster up the energy to be outraged. I just feel like, okay, here we are. One more
And I
thing.
think that's the fear, right? Like, what is the next iteration of this look like? And I think in the show and obviously in conversation across the country, one spends so much time analyzing whether or not the United States is slowly turning into a type of authoritarian regime, right? There's a lot of conversation around that. And I'm always left thinking about this idea of Christian nationalism, which was a term that was tossed around during the election, not so much now. But then I look at some elements of this administration, right? This idea that within the White House, there's an anti-Christian bias task force. This fact that you have someone like Paula White that is leading the White House Office of Faith, someone that has said that the Black Lives Matter movement is, quote, the Antichrist. You have people like the Vice President of the United States, Stephen Miller, the president himself, who, and correct me if I'm wrong, who I think tend to cast some of their policies as the sort of good versus evil warfare, right? This idea that they are being called upon, at times they'll say the word God, to sort of implement some of, I think, the most cruel policies that we've seen in modern American history. And so when you take a step back and you look at that, are you afraid that there are people within the administration that are trying to turn this country into a truly Christian nationalist nation? And what are some of the warning signs that we should be paying attention to?
Well, you've said a lot. And you've described. No. I was with you every step of the way.
I know.
But let's just unpack a few things.
Please.
First of all, the alignment of a religion or religious leaders with political power to justify certain directions of a country, is nothing new, right? It's been around since the beginning of time. And Christianity has had horrific versions of this all across the world, and we've had terrible expressions of it in this country. So it's a resurgence of something that's as old as the hills. However, to separate that alignment of a particular worldview and a protection of a particular class of people who describe themselves as adherents to a particular faith, as in fact the faith itself, is the most egregious distortion of the faith. And if you notice, these people almost never quote Jesus himself, right?
That's true.
Never. Because he never says the things that they say, ever. And so they quote all kinds of obscure passages from Scripture, and you can find anything you want to in a collection of documents that are 10,000 years old if you want, but it is not a lived expression of an authentic faith rooted in the love and mercy and forgiveness of Jesus. It's just not. So I disassociate Christianity with this movement as I understand the faith. I'm not saying that these people don't believe that they're Christian. I'm just saying that the powers that they are aligning with are decidedly hostile to the Christian message. So that's just, yeah.
And,
Go ahead.
before we move on from that, can I just ask you, why then does someone like Donald Trump have so much support among Christians?
Good question. It's something I wrestle with, and I wouldn't pretend to tell you that I know the answer.
Mhm.
Right? I listened hard, especially during the campaign. I listened to him make all kinds of promises that I knew he wouldn't be able to keep, and he hasn't kept. And he promised people the moon and back if they voted for him. He also created common enemies, people who we could blame for our misfortunes, and kept on saying all manner of falsehoods that were then repeated and amplified by a whole machinery of people that of mechanisms that keep all these falsehoods in the air. So there's some accountability for blatant dishonesty and abuse of power. Why people in congregations across this country find in Donald Trump and the movement that he represents something that reminds them of the way of Jesus, I cannot fully understand. Although I am curious and I am willing and eager to explore that.
Of course.
Help me reconcile what you're doing with the teachings of Jesus. And when did you get the memo that our job was to create a government that just protects Christians? I mean, there is nothing in the Gospels that says that we are to create a country that is safe just for Christians, right? That, in fact, it's the opposite. It's for all people, peace on earth, goodwill towards all people. It's not. And whenever a faith, and in this case, it's Christianity, in other parts of the world, it's other faiths. But when you imagine that your role in the public square is to make it safe for you at the expense of everybody else, then you are misusing your faith in the public arena, which is meant, particularly in a democracy, to serve the common good.
So let me stay with the conversation that you're having. So what do you think about prominent pastors who have publicly encouraged to vote for Donald Trump? And the question is quite simple: is it unchristian for a minister to publicly support Donald Trump?
Is it unchristian? That's a hard question for me, because if people who are Christian are supporting Donald Trump, they have every right to support him as president, right? Where I would draw the line is to say that it would be unchristian not to support. I think that it would be unchristian not to support him, right? That they associate him with some kind of divine status that is the only Christian response. I think that's where we get into trouble, because then we're not judging him or his administration on their needs. It's something else. And I worry that I may be in one-on-one conversation with people who are genuine supporters of the direction that he is taking this country. I ask a lot of questions. I am curious, and I don't mean to demonize anyone, but I do struggle as I try to understand how to reconcile the dishonesty, the concentration of wealth and power, the treatment of the most vulnerable, the lack of investment in the very things we need to create not only a healthy education system, healthcare system, but the health of the planet. Why we would strip all of that away and still believe that this is a God-ordained movement. I just don't see the evidence.
So maybe I admit maybe my question was way too broad. So let me try just to give you an example. The vast majority of people supporting Donald Trump are religious people. And now that everybody's talking about the possibility of war in Venezuela, the question is, from a religious point of view, is war ever justified?
Hard-hitting questions, Bishop. Sorry. No, but that's
Well, let me just say this. War is not justified in Venezuela. Let me just be very clear about that. It's a scam. It is what's happening in the waters off the shores of South America is criminal. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that war is never justified, although I believe Jesus was a pacifist, is a pacifist, and probably the purest Christian expression would be complete and total pacifism. I'm just not sure when I look historically at the rise of the most truly horrific political and social movements, if military force isn't sometimes necessary. But again, I'm not an expert on that, and I'm humbled by it. It breaks my heart even to say it. But I can say that an unjust war fought for dubious and dishonest reasons is wrong. Absolutely wrong.
We have to take another break, but we'll be right back. And now we continue our conversation with Bishop Budde. Paola.
So I'm going to be completely honest, Bishop. So I'm a queer woman, and it is true that at times I myself in the past have not always felt the most comfortable in some religious spaces, right? For obvious reasons. And so one of the things, though, that I have long admired about you and your career is the fact that, as you've written extensively and throughout your life, and obviously in your most recent books, like you have always had the courage to stand up for marginalized communities. And you've always done that, whether it's immigrants or LGBTQ people. And I think a lot of people also forget when talking about you that in 2018, you actually oversaw the interment of Matthew Shepard's remains at the National Cathedral, which was, of course, a huge moment in LGBTQ history. And for those listeners that don't remember Shepard, obviously he was brutally murdered in 1998. And I think to this day, it's one of the most high-profile hate crimes in history. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, and particularly as you were talking about some of the more personal conversations that you have with, say, President Trump supporters. And I've been thinking about how you are able to approach conversations about LGBTQ people, particularly, let's say, trans people, such a villainized community.
Right.
And I have the most simple question for you, which is how do you do that? How do you humanize such a, quote, controversial segment of the population to some of these folks?
I mean, not successfully all the time, obviously, but I would say that you said it in the question, which is humanize. It's a question of humanity, and it's a question of seeing in someone else their full humanity, and to understand that we all are raised in societies that have taught us certain things about what it means to be an acceptable human being, right? Or a human being that is, whatever being a good person is, and the struggle for the LGBTQ population of this world to be recognized and embraced and celebrated for who they are has been the story of my adult life, right? Especially in the church that I served, we didn't get there overnight, right? This was a long struggle. And the way it happens is through relationships, right? It happens through relationships. And when it's your friend or your daughter or your son or your mother or your dad, I mean, it just changes the way you see an abstract issue, right? It's not an issue, it's a human being. And then you begin to have different questions and different conversations about how this can be. And in the end, you don't need to have all the answers. The bottom line is, do I love this person? Will I embrace this person as a fellow human being? And I say the same thing about the people with whom I vehemently disagree on all of these issues, right? the same approach. It's just like, can I see them as human beings? And so when I am at my best, and I'm not always, it's asking God to show me how God loves the person in front of me, and how I am to serve that person as if that person were Christ himself, right? And then also to learn their story, to learn their story. And when you know a person's story and you learn about them in a deep way, you don't have to agree with everything. You have to understand everything. It might still be foreign to you, their way of living, their way of loving. I mean, fill in the blanks, right? But to say, okay, now there are some things I would say, I draw some lines somewhere. Not all behavior, not all ways of being are, in my view, morally acceptable. And what I mean by that is like violence or abuse or dehumanization. There are some lines we have to draw that say,
Of course.
yeah, you can have your opinions, you can have your perspectives, but you don't get to trample on other people's dignity, right? That's kind of that's a line not about your being, but about your behavior, right? And the way the church changed, my church changed, is because we raised kids who came out as queer, and it's like, okay, they were baptized, they were part of our church, they were and it was just part of our humanity, and they were the ones who said to me, do you see that I belong here? Not will you let me belong here, but it's like, can you see that I belong here? And I feel like that's the question, not will we let people belong, but
that's such a different framing. Yeah.
It's such a different framing. It's not, we're going to let you in. It's like, no, you already belong. And it's up to us to change our lenses. And that's how I feel about the immigrant. I just came back from Minnesota, right? And you heard what President Trump said about Somali people, right?
Yeah.
And that Minnesota has the largest Somali population in the United States, right? And was that an easy transition for people to immigrate from Somalia to Minnesota? No, but they are now just an integral part. That population is an integral part of our society, and so they belong. We don't give them belonging. They're here. They're here.
I'll speak for myself, right? I because I throughout my life, right? It's I still think it is rare, to find religious figures sort of protecting the LGBTQ community, accepting, telling folks like myself that we belong. And I think many would say, right, that is an act of courage, right? That it is very brave, for people like yourself to do something like that. And do you think that courage is contagious, right? In other words, have some of your colleagues followed your lead since you've been standing up for queer people and immigrants? Have you noticed that ripple effect?
Well, let me first of all say that I absolutely believe that courage is contagious, and I draw courage from other people, right? Like, you need to know that one of the reasons that I had the courage to say what I did in January was because I had read a statement that a group of Roman Catholic bishops had said in California about their stance regarding the migrant population of California. And I was really inspired by their courage. And I thought, you know what, that's the kind of religious leader I want to be like them, right? I want to be like them. I mean, it was so slow going for so long. And then there was such progress, like lightning speed progress, it seemed like, when marriage was finally legalized. And there was just all of this acceptance. And to see that eroded now in some parts of the country is, it's heartbreaking, but it's also like, we're not, we're just not going back there. And so if you want to, you go, but not me. And and I do think that others, we pass it along. Like, some days I might have the courage, and then I falter because of whatever, right? But then you might have it, or we'll hear somebody else, and we'll just kind of, because it's communal. It's like electricity. It passes
like
between
the strength
us.
in numbers.
It's strength in numbers, but it's also just this mysterious thing, right? This mystery that we have this thing, and it keeps us And it's like hope. We can't, it's like a survival thing. We're just not wired to let it go. But not all of us can do it all the time, so it's nice to be able to lean on each other, right?
Yeah.
Nos quedan solo unos minutos, but we know that you lived in Honduras.
Sí.
And obviously usted aprendió español en Honduras
Sí,
y lo habla muy bien.
Gracias.
¿Qué más aprendió en Honduras? What else did you learn in Honduras?
¿Qué más aprendió? Yo aprendí la perseverancia del espíritu humano. La injusticia profunda de pobreza total broke my heart. I've never seen poverty. La necesidad de contribuir o construir una sociedad basada en los derechos humanos de todo el pueblo. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but I just saw the results of a country so polarized between rich and poor. And I feel that, we're seeing more and more of that here. I learned joy, alegría. I learned how to dance.
Really?
Salsa?
Salsa.
No salsa. Do they have salsa in Honduras?
No salsa,
No.
pero just some really good, they did some great rhythms. And yo trabajé con niños, ¿sabes? Estaba en un lugar de niños abandonados.
Yeah.
Y el espíritu de ellos y su deseo de hacerlo bien, de trabajar bien y construir y dar apoyo a sus familias de lejos, all of it. It was just, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I mean, I was there, I was very young when I was there. And we still have godchildren that we support. And we see, I work with a lot of Hondureños here in Washington. A lot of Honduran immigrants in Washington.
I know. I can tell that experience really, really marked you, and most likely really marked the rest of your career.
Yeah, I actually thought I would stay there. I would spend my ordained ministry there, but that was not to be, and so I'm here, and. But I happen to live in a part of the world where, there's such a strong concentration of Latino, Hispanic people from all over the Spanish-speaking world. And now third and fourth generation, people who have really made their lives here, as well as the wave of immigrants that have come of late.
We have 2 more questions for you and that's it.
Okay,
Paola.
okay.
Paola.
Yep, I am maybe to actually no, this has actually been, I was about to say, to end on a positive note, but you have given us hope and faith actually throughout this conversation. So I will reframe my question.
Okay.
But I do think it is a time when a lot of people obviously feel scared. There's so much mistrust in government and the system. You have countless people that are thinking of leaving this country altogether.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you think of yourself, how do you find the courage to still trust God and perhaps most importantly, to trust yourself in a moment like the one we're living in right now?
There's a story in the Gospels where Jesus is praying, and it's kind of like the Garden of Gethsemane, but it's different. And he basically says something to the effect of, now my heart is troubled. And what should I say? Spare me from this hour. And instead of saying, let this cup pass from me, this is from the Gospel of John, he says, no, it is for this reason that I have come to this hour. And I hear in that a recognition that sometimes we don't choose the times that we are living in, but we do choose how we respond. I would give anything not to be living in the time we're living in right now. I would love for this for us to be having a completely different conversation, but we're not. And I'm in a position where this is my time. I don't have any. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let discouragement or cynicism or bitterness get in my way. I'm going to just keep on holding what we believe to be true and right and good. And and work for a better day. Whether or not we're successful, we're just going to keep going.
So my final question is, if you don't mind, it's a personal question.
Okay.
I know that you've written about miracles, and you're probably closest to God than many other people. So I am agnostic. I have no faith. I wish I could have faith, but I have to be honest to myself, and I have no faith. So what happens when we die?
I don't know. But I know I believe that we can trust that on the other side, we will be met by love. I also believe that there is more waiting for us. But what that is and what it will be like, I cannot say.
But you're convinced that there's an afterlife, that there's something after this, that we're not going to be just stardust.
I can't prove it. I can't. It's something I'm willing to stake. I'm willing to believe it in the sense that I'm willing. I'm giving. I've seen enough, I should say, to believe that this is not the end, and that there is consciousness. What form it takes, what awaits us, I don't know. But I also know that it's not healthy to dwell too much on what's on the other side while we have life to live now. Now, when it's our time, and I've sat with many people who have crossed over from this life to whatever awaits us on the other side, then we surrender to it. And that's a very poignant and courageous thing to do. We'll all do it. Then we embrace it. But until then, I think our task is to choose life, as Scripture says, to choose life and to work for whatever we imagine God's desire would be. Jesus said, pray for the kingdom to be here, on earth as it is in heaven, to do that work now. That's our best way for preparing for whatever lies on the other side. And even if there's nothing, even if I'm wrong, I will live this way until the day I die, and trust that will not have been in vain. So.
Bishop, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Thank you. Bye.
The Moment is a production of Radio Ambulante Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura Podcast Network. Our staff includes Daniela Alarcón, Laura Roja Aponte, and Miguel Santiago Colón, with help from Paolo Alian, Diego Corso, Natalia Ramirez, and Elsa Liliana Ulloa. The CEO of Radio Ambulante Studios is Carolina Guerrero. Executive producers at iHeart are Arlene Santana and Leo Gomez. Pablo Cabrera, Dylan Unger, and Mark Cannon also serve as producers. Sound design, final mix, and theme song by Elias Gonzalez. Our hosts are Jorge Ramos and Paola Ramos. If you like this episode, please share the word. Recommend The Moment to anyone who might enjoy unpacking these complicated times with us. We're heading into a short holiday break, but we'll be back with more episodes on January 7th. In the meantime, si te gustan los podcasts español, check out Radio Ambulante Studios. Our shows, Radio Ambulante, El Hilo, and Central, are really worth a listen. I'm Lisa Cerda. Thanks for listening.